up, you guys? Today I'm doing something super exciting. I've been wanting to do this for years, and today I'm pulling it off. This all has to do with the 2002 to present Honda Ruckus 50. Actually, to be honest with you, it doesn't even matter if it's a Honda Ruckus. This all has to do with four-stroke engines. I don't care if it's a boat, car, motorcycle, ATV, jet ski, doesn't matter. If you have a four-stroke engine, this video will apply. But in particular, this is for the Honda Ruckus 50. What am I even talking about? Well, everybody's familiar with bolt-ons like carburetors, performance exhaust, CDI boxes, things like that. The bolt-on stuff, the easy stuff. Today, we're going inside the engine. I'm going to show you step by step how to install titanium valves, do a valve job, install a camshaft, performance camshaft, and port the head. More air in, more air out equals more performance. Now, there's probably a reason why most people don't do this. It's pretty intimidating. No need to worry. I'm going to show you step by step how to do this. Let's do it. So we've got the head pretty torn down. The last step is to remove the valves out of the head because we want to port this head and we're going to go with titanium valves. So if you notice, there's some springs in there and there's some keepers. I'll show you what I mean in just a minute. But we're going to need a special tool to do that. We've got these on the website. This is a valve spring compression tool. And it's got different size for different size engines. So what we want to do, I know that this one works perfectly for hugging the top of the valve so we can pull the keepers out. This is going to act like a vise to press that valve down, and then there's some keepers down in here. I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so I've got my tool here, and the idea is to put this above the retainer like this. See how that is, right over the top? If it's off the edge of a table, then you could spin your vise here. So I've got my tool here. If you notice, the tool is right wrapped around the valve retainer there. See the other side? The pin is right in the very, very center. So what I'm going to do, like I said, I do it on the edge of a table here, like this. I'm just going to tighten this, start tightening this down. And I want to look on the other side, make sure we're good. We're still centered on the other side. So we've compressed the valve retainer all the way down, and then there's a retainer locks in there. There's two of them, so I'm going to stick my magnet in here. There's one. See what that looks like? Now there should be one more, and you kind of sometimes have to give this thing a little wiggle. Now I'll just pull this last one out. There it is. Okay, so now I could start loosening the tool. And the spring should come loose. This is really easy. People get intimidated by this. It's really, really easy. Keep going. There we go. Pull the tool out of the way. There's the valve retainer. Show you how that all works in just a sec. Then we got the spring. Then you notice there's a valve seal. And then there's the bottom side of that retainer. I'll get that off a little later, but I can push this valve out. Just give it a little push like that. And we're going to replace these seals as well, so we don't have to really worry about those too much. Spin this around. There it is. Pull it out. There's our old valve. I want to show you how this even works. So if you put the spring over it, and then you've got your valve retainer. And then you've got your valve retainer locks. These are the locks here, okay? Now, I'm going to take these and I'll put this right over the top, just like that. See that? And another one goes on the other side. I'm just showing you how these go, so when we put them back on, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, so see how those go? Now if I slide the retainer up like this, see how I can't push that valve out of there at all? And if I lower it down, the retainer, see how those guys lock it in and they just fallen off. Those how those go on there. They're held in by this retainer once that cone shape is pointing down. Just want to make sure you guys understand that. So then we've got our valve seals down in here. I normally just use a screwdriver. There's a few different methods you can use. to pop that off of there. Just give it a little push with the flathead screwdriver. There we go. Popped it off of there. Let me grab it. So there it is. There's another one, of course, but we haven't done that yet. Grab your magnet to grab the bottom valve spring seat. Pull that out of there. This is the part where the bottom part of the spring attaches. And then you've got your top valve spring seat. Then your keepers go in. Just want to make sure you understand what's going on. So now we've got this valve completely out, the upper and lower valve seats, and the valve locks, and the valve seal. This one's still complete, so I'm going to get that out of there really quick. But as you can see, that we can look through all the way through our exhaust valve there, all the way to your exhaust port. And that's where we're going to be boring. This head is completely torn down. We're ready to start porting. I'll show you exactly what I mean when we do that. So we'll be using an intake manifold like this. So what I want to do is I want to kind of hold it up, bolt it up if anything. And we're going to look down in that hole, and this hole and this hole should match up perfectly. There shouldn't be any steps or anything like that. That's the idea. When I mount this up on here, we've got a smooth transition. Imagine when you put water, if you were to put water through here, you don't want any wave or white water going. You just want smooth transition. So I'm just going to basically cone this out, make it like a cone, and smooth it out. So the goal here is we don't want like a sharp 90 degree. We want it just smooth all the way in. So this hole, this is the intake hole. Air and fuel from your carburetor or your fuel injection system comes through here, and it curves around and goes through here, through your intake when your valve opens. So you want that as smooth as possible and as large as possible given your intake. We're not going to take a lot of meat out of here at all. It's really decent, but on the exhaust, that is where the issue is. Let me show you more what I mean. So just to give you an idea, here's the original head that hasn't had any porting done. And then here's one that's already been ported. If you notice, see how smooth? It's kind of difficult to see how smooth it is, but if you feel it, it's really, really smooth. See, I can almost go to my knuckle there. Now this guy, not quite. It's a lot larger. So we want to do something like that, smooth it out, make it slightly bigger, but the real work is going to be in the exhaust side. So on our exhaust side, if you notice, you can see that black. See how small that is? When you compare it to this other ported head, we definitely need to enlarge that a lot bigger and smooth it out. Same procedure. That's the idea. Smooth it out, make it a little bit larger. More air in, more air out, more performance. So here's the setup that I use. I use a Dremel type. This isn't an actual Dremel, but I use a Dremel attachment. See that? That way you can move it around. It's tiny. It's not this big gun here. And then these are some of the attachments that I use. First of all, I start out with this bit. It's a heavy-duty grinder, a cone-shaped guy. That'll get the meat and kind of allow you to shape it, get all that meat off of there. That's really aggressive. And then I come in and smooth it out with a cone-shaped sandpaper. And then sometimes I'll use this, just a normal sandpaper bit, to clean the edges up. And then the final step is going to be just a buffing wheel. So this is pretty aggressive, a little bit less aggressive, and then super soft. So that's kind of the idea there. One thing though I need to go over. On the bottom of your head, you've got your valves, and you've got the seat, the ring along there where the ring of the valve sits. It's called your valve seat. So if I slide that through like that, there's a mating area across there. You want to make dang sure that you don't mess up or grind in any of those valve seats. Very, very important. That's that outer edge, right where they mate. We're going to use some lapping compound to help these valves and the valve seat mate better, but if you nick that valve seat, you're in big trouble. You'll probably have to replace your head. So it's always a good idea to put a little bit of tape if you don't feel comfortable. I've got everything laid out, ready to start porting this head. If you notice, I have it right next to open engine components that are ready to be assembled. That is a huge no-no. You want to make sure no metal shavings or anything like that are even near this area, because the last thing you need is metal shavings in your engine. Once we port this head, we're going to clean the living hell out of it so that there's no metal shards or of any kind inside this head. One more thing, if you look down where the valve, right down there, you'll see that little ring in the middle. That's your valve guide. You don't want to do any type of grinding on that. It stays the way it is, otherwise it weakens it and it'll break, and then you'll have big problems. So don't mess with the valve guide. So as you can see, I've opened up that exhaust port. You can see it's much smoother than stock. Here's kind of a cool little graph that shows you, like here would be the original port. See how it's like a 90 degree? And in the modified port, see how it's more of a smooth sweeping? So you want to make sure that you're trying to go more towards this angle. That's like the best illustration that I found for porting it yourself. And you'll open up the port also a little bit more. If you notice, like this blue one is quite a bit larger than just the yellow one. So use this graph to kind of give you an idea of what you're really doing. All right, done. So what I did was I enlarged this quite a bit because we're going to do a 28 millimeter EFI throttle body. I've also made this a little bit larger as well. You can see it's a little bit oblong. So that'll attach there. I port matched it. So if you put your finger down there, everything's matching up perfectly. I got this all ported out and smooth. Same with the exhaust. All right. She's in there getting cleaned up. Get her out and let's see how she looks. Oh yeah. This is an ultrasonic cleaner. Cleans up all the grease, gets all the shavings out, and then I'll wash it off in the sink, dry it off with the air compressor. Because we're doing brand new valves, we've got this titanium valve, and you've got a seat here, and you've got a seat here, right on the edge of the valve. So when I slide the valve in, since we've got a brand new valve and an old seat from the old valve, this seal, because it's a metal on metal seal, it needs to be really good. So that means we need to refinish that surface. So there's this thing called a lapping compound. It's basically a mixture of grease and sandpaper. There's fine and coarse. So we're going to take some coarse, put it right along the seat there, slide it in there. On the other side, we'll slide it in there. And on the other side, we've got our valve. We'll put a piece of hose on there. We'll move it around like that. And essentially it's like sandpaper. And that'll clean up any indifferences on the mating surfaces of where these valves seal. And then we'll do the same thing with fine. So we start with coarse and then we'll do fine. That's what you call a valve job or lapping the valves. Okay, so this is the coarse lapping compound. This doesn't take much, so I like to use take a screwdriver just a little bit and then run it down the edge of the mating surface. Okay, we're going to slide this down. You want to make sure that you don't have any lapping compound on the shaft of the valve, because we don't want to be lapping the valve seal, the valve guide. So slide that down just like that. Okay, now I've got some hose we're just going to put onto the valve like that. Then I'll take the other end of the hose, put it into a drill, and turn the drill on. And from the other side, you'll notice the valve is spinning. They'll start to get smooth over after a little while, like now. It doesn't take much. So now we've gotten the coarse part of that done. So I'm going to pull this hose off, slide the valve out. If you notice, the valve is nice. You can see the line right where it was lapped. So we're going to do the same exact thing, just with the fine lapping compound. The titanium valves are resurfaced to seat perfectly in the head. To put this head together, you're going to need just some grease and a fine tipped flathead screwdriver. You'll need your valve compressor tool and all the parts that you took out, excluding the new valves. So we've got our new valve seals. You always want to replace your valve seals if you're doing a brand new valve job, definitely. These seals are super cheap. This is the Ruckus part number, so you can replace them if you need. So I wanted to show you guys the weight difference in the titanium valves. Here's the titanium valve. 9 grams on the exhaust or the intake valve, and then the stock valve is 15 grams. That's like a 6 gram difference, quite a bit difference. And then we'll do the intake. That's 8 grams. Stock one, 4 grams, 4 gram difference. So as you can see, the titanium valves are definitely a lot lighter. Obviously, that's the reason why we're using them. So then of course you would wonder, why would we go with lightened valves over the stock valves? Titanium. The reason why is the lighter the rotating mass, or the lighter the valve train, the faster the engine spools up. Now, here's another reason why. So we're doing a performance camshaft like this one. These lobes have a lot more meat on them as opposed to the stock camshaft. So if I weigh the stock camshaft, we're at 165 grams. That's the stock cam. It's going to weigh less than this guy at 174 grams. So it's about 10 more grams. So by adding the new cam, we're adding about 10 grams in weight to our valve train, which isn't good. But by adding the titanium valves, we save about 11 grams of weight. So that's cool. So it kind of equals itself out. The performance cam is definitely worth it because it's got the larger lobes, but unfortunately it weighs more. There's some people that hollow these cams out. You can have that done as well. So in short, you always want to do the titanium valves and performance cam together. It makes for the perfect performance upgrade. I'd also add the light and flywheel while you're at it. That's this guy. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. I have everything laid out in the way that it needs to be. So we got the lower valve spring retainer, the valve seal, the titanium valve, the valve spring, the top valve retainer, and the valve locks. This is everything in line the way it needs to be installed. Step one, we're going to put this lower valve spring retainer in. Then we're going to put the valve seal on. We want to put a little bit of grease to help it along. Give that a little push. Goes in really, really easy. We'll do the same thing on the other side. Now we've got our actual valves. I'm going to put a little bit of grease around the shaft of the valve, and then we're going to slide that sucker through. Being really, really careful. Very important that we were putting the grease right on the tip, and when we push in, we turn at the same time. Very, very slowly, because that valve seal is on the other side, and we don't want to damage it in any way. So it's a slow spin and a slow push. Now, if we were working on a different engine, they have certain sleeves to go over the end so it doesn't damage the seal. These are really rounded off, so you're good there. So do the same exact thing on the exhaust valve. Those valves are in. Okay, now we're going to do our intake valves and spring first. So I'll put this spring right over the top, and then the top valve spring retainer, the part that holds the locks in place. We're not going to do this side yet. We need to use our tool to get this down so that we can get our valve locks in. Okay, now we're going to use our valve spring compressor tool. If you notice back here, I've got the valve. I was being really careful where the stem is coming out. You want it to jam up against the valve retainers, the spring valve retainer, while you're cranking it down. You don't need to go too far, just enough to get your valve retainer clips in. So I've got just enough of that valve sticking out that you can see. Now I'll put my retainer clips in there, my valve locks, So I just put a little bit of grease down on the end of a screwdriver, the flathead. Then I take the valve lock and just grab it with the grease, and I'm going to go in there real easy and try to have it to attach to itself. It's not the easiest thing, I can tell you that. You just need to have patience. Okay, we got one in. We'll do another one. So I'm going to grab the valve lock again, just dabbing it with grease, just like this, and come around the other side. So when you think you've got it in, then you can start loosening. And you want to make sure that you got to move the tool in such a way that it's centered and it doesn't pull one of those locks up. So I've got it in. You can see the two halves kind of in there. So I always want to flip it over, and then I give the valve a little bit of a push to make sure the valve and retainer is in there. Because if it's not, you're going to have big engine problems later. It's very, very important. I'll get this other valve in there off cam since I've showed you how to do this one. So I got both valves in, intake and exhaust, both in there. Now I want to make sure one last time, and give them a little push. Make sure that sucker is in there, because the last thing we need is these valves to come out. Now here's the cool thing, is I've got this head completely out, so I can actually do a valve adjustment. I don't even need to do top dead center or anything like that. Since the head is going to be already at top dead center, or the cam is, I'll show you how to do that. This will be a valve adjustment and cam installed next. So here's our performance camshaft. Super sweet. We got these on the website, of course. So this cam slides right straight in. We always want to make sure that the cam lobes are pointed down. See how they're down? Just like that. Down. Not up. Okay? I did put a little bit of grease around just the metal pieces that are going to be mating together. We'll use some assembly lube later, but we just want to make sure that it's not metal on metal dry. So this cam, with the cam lobes down, doesn't have to be super precise right now. It's going to go in this head. Super easy. See how I can move the cams all around? Just like that. We want the cam lobes down. So one's going to be facing that way, one will face this way in a downward motion. Now we need to install the rocker arms into this head, and there is a certain way to do this. If you notice, I have the rockers, spring, and pin set aside in the way that it goes in. They're not in the same duration, and I'll show you why in just a minute. If you notice, one of the pins has an O-ring, and it also has a little notch on the end of it. These are going to slide right in to the top here. Let me show you how to do that. And we're going to leave the valve shims out for the moment, and I'll show you why. Before I do anything, I've got a little oil cap there. I'm going to add a little bit of oil inside a cap, just as an assembly oil, as I assemble this. I want to coat these parts in oil just to make sure they're not dry when I put them in, because it's going to be dry for a little bit when you first start the engine until oil reaches the top. So it's really important to get all this stuff kind of lubed up. Do the same thing with the cam lobes. Just coat them in a nice coat of oil so that you're not dry when you go to assemble all this. Now I'm going to take these in this order. I'm going to set this rocker arm here. You notice right here it's touching the top of the spring and valve retainer, and I'm going to put the spring right in there. That'll hold it. And I'll do the same thing over here, but it's kind of the opposite effect. Now we've got this pin. This is the solid pin. You got to make sure you slide it through here, because if I try to go another way, it's not going to slide in very easy. So come through the part here, right here, and you have to line up your spring, give it a little wiggle, and your rocker arm until you get it all the way in. Now that one's all the way in. Now this one, it's got the O-ring at the back. You got to go through the cutout there that's made for it, otherwise you can't get it in. See, so I can't slide that up. It's very difficult. So slide that in. Oh, one more thing. At the bottom, you notice this little angle? That needs to go up like that, and I'll show you why in just a minute. So I'm going to slide this in. I did put a little bit of oil on this O-ring. Slide this through. This O-ring will hold it in place. Just got to make sure you don't have your spring kind of pinched between, which I did, just like that. Let me explain what that little notch was all about. So when I go to bolt this to the head, I'll have this little cap, just like this. If you notice, see there? See how that's shaped? If I had that any other place, I wouldn't be able to do it. If you look here, it's blocked that pin so it can't slide out. And also you've got this little part right here that's holding the cam in. The cam can't slide out when this is installed. And then same with the pin. See, that comes down when it's bolted down completely. Now on the head, if you notice, I can move this cam around with my finger. So see, notice that lobe right over here? See how that's coming up? If I go the other way, coming up. You want the cam lobes down, just like I have it. So now that I kind of showed you what this does, let's put it back on there so that we can add the shims in and kind of do a rough draft of our valve adjustment. So I'm just keeping that in there so that when I move my rockers left and right, like this, see how it's trying to push this cam out? If I didn't have it on there like this, and I move it over, it'll push the cam out, just like that. That's the reason why I want to put that on there. And you can even wait till the end to do the valve adjustment, but I prefer to do it right now. Now you want to flip the head on its side. It's like this. And see, I can move the cam around. You want to make sure that remember, cam lobe's down towards the valves here. And you notice, here's the sprocket. It's got a little notch on it, like that. That's upside down, so you flip it up like this. And we want that line right there to line up with the line right there. So what I do is I slide this sucker in here just like this. Okay? And our line there is lining up with the line there, right there. So now come around here. We need to get a screw in there just to hold it temporarily. This isn't going to stay in there. This is just for us to do our little adjustment so that this thing doesn't slide off. So I'm just going to tighten this down. Again, there's other ways to do this. This is the way I prefer to do it. Some people wait till the engine's completely installed. This isn't even actually the correct bolt, I don't believe, but at least it holds it in place. That's all I care about. We've got our line right here and line right there. This is top dead center. Now normally you would turn the engine over when it's attached to the engine to get to top dead center, but since this is a head that's been removed, we know the cam lobes are down and we've got the lines lined up, we can actually do our valve adjustment right now, and I'll show you how to do that. If you enjoyed this video and it helped you along, well, you're in luck, because I've got a complete library of dozens of videos that shows you step by step how to do certain projects. This is a perfect example of what to expect in our DIY video library. This is a membership site here on YouTube. You can click the link down below if you're interested, or next to the subscribe button on a desktop computer, there's a little join button. You can click that to become a member. That'll give you access to the complete DIY video library, along with all the free lives that we put out each week that go into a private area. That's going to be in that DIY video library. If that resonates with you, click the link down below. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video.